Ed Miliband speaking at the Labour Party conference. He said Britain can do better than this, but could he have done any better? With me to discuss that is the Sunday Telegraph economics commentator Liam Halligan and Telegraph leader writer Tim Stanley. Tim, were you satisfied with Ed's performance?
Well, throughout the whole thing, I kept on watching and thinking to myself, you know, Britain can do better than this, and that's better than Ed Miliband. It was an extraordinary speech. It was one in which he promised, actually, I thought a lot more than I was expecting him to, and I'm sure we'll discuss that, the gas prices, the lowering the voting age, all that sort of thing. I thought there was also some philosophical substance. I don't necessarily agree with it, but which did interest me, saying that we can't compete with developing countries in the way that the Tories want to, so we're going to focus instead upon living standards. So although it was a speech which left me personally feeling cold, because I don't think government's there to give me a hand up with everything. You know, I was waiting for him to announce a tax break for people with the name Tim. But I must confess there was some philosophy there. I think there were some concrete ideas, and so I didn't think it was too bad.
Well, you've picked up there on the gas and energy price freeze. Liam, what do you make of that?
Well, I must say I thought it was a sort of student union speech, and then we had the sort of rehashed re-announcement on voting for 16 and 17-year-olds, something that very few people want outside North London dinner tables, sort of gerrymandering, trying to rig the vote towards his own party. I think this energy cap is purported energy cap is a pretty serious announcement. I doubt very much it will happen. I think we haven't seen much movement in the share prices of the various energy companies since, which suggests either they don't think Labour's going to win the election, or they know that the contracts that they've got won't allow this kind of thing. Yes, of course, all of us are suffering with energy prices, partly because there isn't enough competition in the market, not because prices aren't fixed, and also because, surprise, surprise, the world's gone from almost 7 billion to 9 billion people over the next 5 to 10 years, and energy is getting far, far more expensive. How about, Mr Miliband, if energy prices actually fall on wholesale markets during the period? Then gas prices and energy prices generally won't fall for households. I think that the reintroduction of price controls in the UK for the first time since the early 70s, plus this almost incredible reversal of the Blairite reforms of the NHS, it does amount to socialism. It strikes me that Ed Miliband's trying to take on this election from the left, which is a complete misreading of what most British people want, it seems to me.
And that goes with the wage stuff too. All this talk, which is very confusing, about different kinds of wages for people in different sectors. I instantly thought 70s pay board.
Absolutely. I thought resale price maintenance.
Right.
There's a philosophical...
Doesn't he have a point, though, in where he said, actually, you know, people's lives were getting better. People will be able to afford properties in the 80s. He saw that when he was growing up. And now, for the young today, you do have to think about this. And he had a nice panel of young people behind him,
all nodding
along like little dogs. But we are in a situation where people can't buy their own property, where they are living at home with their parents for longer. Yeah. And does he not have a point? The battleground is going to be around living standards, Tim.
I personally think that the historically unique thing of people all owning a house in the 50s, 60s and 70s was historically unique. I think the message of austerity should be that we have to live simpler lives and we have to expect less of government. The idea that you can say we'll use government to put living standards back to where they were during an extraordinary period where there were less people, housing growth was bigger, and importantly people were able to buy council houses fairly cheap rates. The idea that you can recreate that, I think, is rather foolish, and I also don't want to flatten the country in the rush to do it.
OK, on the economy though, because he talked about strengthening the minimum wage. We're still not quite sure what he's going to mean. Nobody knows what that means, but let's just put that to one side for a moment.
In bold caps,
he did do this big overture to small business. And do you think he's done enough? Because, as he said, Cameron's doing a lap of honour at the moment, saying he's had this brilliant victory with the economy. Has he done enough to woo the right kind of business?
I don't think so. Of course, small business is crucial electoral ground, 50% of GDP, 50% of our exports, 2/3 of all private sector employment, many Telegraph readers among them, of course. We're now in the realms of the metaphysical. This is almost Lewis Carroll. Let's just think what Ed Miliband's done. He's now pledging to reverse a tax cut on corporation tax that may or may not come in 2015. That's what our politics is reduced to. You know, future historians are going to look back and scratch their heads and then reach for a revolver when they look at this speech, and we'll see what the Tories come up with next week. We have a situation where this country has a gilts market that's basically propped up by printed money, and we're arguing how we're going to carve up tiny little tax increases and tax falls in the grand scheme of things in 4 or 5 years' time. He said absolutely nothing about banking reform. He said absolutely nothing about getting this country's borrowing onto a sustainable path. It was a massive missed opportunity for Labour, I think. Most of this speech was directed at the conference hall. Note that party reform, the trade union link, skirted over amidst much laughing and joking, and then only 3 sentences on it, airbrushed over with goodwill. And meanwhile, outside the party conference, which is where his real audience is, I think a lot of people will be scratching their head.
Tim, do you think they'll be scratching their head, though, thinking, maybe this is somebody who speaks to me? Did he seem in any way like Prime Minister Ed Miliband material?
I don't think anyone's trying to do that. I think all 3 conferences are going to be about being normal. We had that last week with Nick Clegg. I think we had a lot of normality this week where, Ed Miliband told us that he has a mum. He's just like me. He has a mum. I mean, a really, really rich mum. A lot richer than mine, but he has a mum. So I think we got a lot of normal. I slightly disagree. I feel there's very little he can say or put on the table at this stage because the election hasn't been called. He can't draw a manifesto. Everyone's saying, what are your ideas? It's just too early to say. So I think what he's doing is throwing out big headline ideas, not really costed, little bit silly, but nonetheless, I think they're going to dominate the headlines. Say you're going to freeze energy prices in 2017, I agree, I think it's economically insane. But I think it probably is going to dominate the headlines and get a lot of people interested.
Liam, final thought?
The final thought, it seems to me that here he is speaking to the party faithful, talking about living standards and in some staged meeting on the pavement before conference talking about socialism, and yet the guy's tie was a nice neutral purple, the backdrop was blue and the message was one nation. He really seems to be trying to have it both ways. This was the party speech, not of a person who's steeped in normal life, however many people called Carol from Chesterfield he claims to have met. This is the speech of somebody who spent their whole life in politics. Their whole world has been spin and dinner party chatter, and I think the British public will see through it.
Tim, one line from you.
He keeps on pronouncing the word "yeah" like "yah," which makes me think of Ted Heath. And when I see the One Nation and I hear him saying "yah," I think we're in the 1970s.
No one drops their H's and says "yah," and that's the problem.
Let's leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed, Liam Halligan, Tim Stanley. Next week we'll be seeing if David Cameron can be a little bit more satisfied with the state of Britain at the Tory party conference. Thank you very much.